Good evening, good evening, good evening. Corey Minor Smith, and I am presenting today on behalf of Corey Empowers our Mental Wealth Wednesday. And we have a wonderful guest. I can't wait to share her with you all, and hoping that this will be a very beneficial conversation for you to learn about resources, to learn about the importance of advocacy, and most importantly, to learn about severe mental illness and those who are living in our communities across the country with severe mental illness with very productive lives and are doing their best to be involved with advocacy and helping to increase awareness and to share resources that are beneficial to them and their families and those who are advocates and want to do more in this space. First, I would like to just acknowledge February. We're at the end of it. One more day with the leap year, but February being Black History Month, and we celebrate it all day, all year here at Corey Empowers. But want to acknowledge that this is Black History Month and celebrating all the achievements of those who have contributed to this country and the advancement of this country for the benefit of this country. So happy Black History Month. And now I'd like to welcome Dina Coughlan. Hi, Dina.
Hi, Corey.
I truly appreciate you being here today and really look forward to this conversation and just hearing from you, your personal experience, your lived experience, and just want to invite you now to just share a little bit about yourself and we'll dive into our conversation.
Great. Thank you so much. So my name is Dina Coughlan, and I am, among many things, a huge mental health advocate. I am someone who was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at 19 years old, and struggled severely with that being one of the diagnoses that I had. It was a life-altering journey that I took, a 10-year hiatus from mainstream society, really, just kind of clawing my way back. I did reach a breaking point, and that's when I had to kind of get help. And the reason I share my story is it is very vulnerable for me to share, but I share it in the hopes that somebody listening will not only gain hope from what I have to say, but also gain some perspective on what people with mental illness look like and talk like. So that's kind of why I'm such an advocate.
Well, I truly appreciate you sharing that. And that is being very vulnerable. And I really appreciate your willingness to do so because it really does help for people to share their stories, to show the reality of living life with a diagnosis such as yours and other severe mental illnesses. And more importantly, that there is help. And I appreciate you using the word clawing your way back, because it is a struggle. But those who don't experience it or know anyone directly, a loved one who experiences it, may not truly understand what it means to claw your way back, to struggle with symptoms that can be debilitating. Please share with us, when did you know it was your breaking point and how did you connect with help?
So I grew up as a very anxious child. I think, this was, so I'm 41 years old, and my hospitalization was at 19, 20 years ago. There's been a lot of changes in the mental health realm, even just talking about it. 20 years ago, it was a very taboo subject. Was not something that anybody wanted to talk about. So I think, it was acknowledged that I was an anxious child growing up. I was placed in therapy at a younger age to kind of help me through some of the normal childhood dilemmas that I was having, that I was struggling with. But when I reached college and moving away from home and really having that first experience of being out in the big bad world, I guess you could say, I had a breaking point. I was not emotionally prepared for that. And actually, believe it or not, happens to a lot of people who are going through that sort of life transition, that transition. So I do know that. But yeah, it was definitely a life-altering change from that point forward.
So were you able to finish school, or did you have to leave what made it your breaking point?
So my anxiety manifests in a very physical a way, as many people may not realize, but mental health is very much connected to physical health. And I grew up with really severe headaches, and nobody was ever able to kind of pinpoint why I was getting them. When I got to college and I was struggling, I started having extremely debilitating headaches, and I could not perform academically. I was struggling to get through the day. And at that point, being in such debilitating pain, coupled with the emotional pain, made me very desperate. And I started to act out. And at that point, my parents had to pull me out of college.
I really appreciate you sharing those details. And I think it's important for people to understand what some of the symptoms are, or at least hear them described, because it may be things that we tend to ignore or try to ignore and just hope that they would go away at some point. But whether it's you experiencing it yourself or your loved one, someone you know, a friend, it's important to identify some of the symptoms that this person may manifest and know that you may need to seek help in order to manage those symptoms. And that ultimately there's nothing wrong with having help, treatment, whether it's medication or some other types of assistance to help people overall to just manage the symptoms. What are your thoughts on managing symptoms or recovery or medication to help with being a part of the treatment plan?
I think it's integral. It's very important. To this day, I'm in weekly therapy. I take medication regularly. I even have to. One of the medications that I take affects my my white blood cell count, so I have to go and get blood work done every month just to make sure everything's working well. But when trying to get off the medication, we realized that a lot of my anxieties come back, and it's harder for me to cope. So it's a big part of the answer for me is the willingness to accept the help and the medication.
So with so much stigma and just like you said, it was kind of taboo and people didn't talk about it before. What made you decide to share your story?
It's a great question, Corey. So I did kind of grow from that experience with the mentality that perhaps I should just push it under the rug and move on. And I was kind of encouraged by, my family, only out of protection, that perhaps sharing the details of my story wouldn't yield a positive effect. It might actually cause a lot of judgment on my behalf, or for people to judge me. So I really did hide it for a very long time. And then, so because I dropped out of school when I was 19, when I finally kind of reintegrated society successfully, I re-entered college at 37. I went to night school at Boston College. And when I was there, I met another girl who was also kind of returning to college in her later years. And she worked for SAMHSA. Oh, wow. Which for anyone who doesn't know is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. And when she heard about my story, because we became close friends, she was just like, wow, you need to talk about this. And she's like, this is a big part of who you are. Like, you can't just not talk about it. And so my friend really encouraged me. And then I had some other encouragement along the way too, but that was a big part.
Yeah. Ooh, that's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, I just think it's important for people to hear from someone with lived experience and understanding, like, this is real. It's a part of life. And ultimately that there is help available to help a person to live a productive, successful life. And I really appreciate you sharing your story. Some may, just from the images that we see in the media, pop culture, movies, situations where a person is experiencing severe mental illness don't always work out so well. And we see these like horror stories, quite honestly, of people living with severe mental illness and just not ultimately being able to get connected to the services or refusing the services. So I appreciate you sharing how you were connected to services and ultimately seeing the benefit of sharing your story.
Absolutely.
You sharing your story and others who are willing to share their story is helping to break down the stigma. What are your thoughts about stigma, and what more can we do to help continue to eradicate stigma?
Well, when you mention the media and the way that sort of Hollywood or just, mainstream media sort of, uh, displays mental illness, it's erroneous. It's not something that I think should be kind of accepted. I think we put a lot of fear, and we fear people who have mental illness. We think maybe perhaps they're dangerous. And more likely than not, and I've been told this in therapy because I ask a lot
Mhm.
of questions. People with mental illness are not typically likely to be very dangerous people.
Right.
They're more likely to cause danger to themselves than to other people. Of course, there are instances when we have, shooters and things like that. But I think we need to address the issue in a way that kind of takes the fear away from it. Like we're human beings, and I think we need to kind of humanize the symptoms and how people kind of live through it.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point in terms of humanizing, because we dehumanize people all the time, subject them to just horrible identities or characteristics that make it easier to do away with them, to dismiss them.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to understand about the treatment again, because being untreated could increase the likelihood of a dangerous situation or a crisis situation where a person is having a mental health crisis. And that's why it's important to know about 988, for example, to call 988 if you or your loved one, maybe not you if you're in the middle of a mental health crisis, I'm being real about that, but those who may be around someone who is having a mental health crisis, that you know that you can call 988 instead of 911, so that the appropriate individuals and treatment team can come out to address the situation. And with that, Dina, I'm thinking about how you have transitioned and, as you said, re-entering the community. Can you talk a little bit about your hospitalization and how was that for you, and what do you want us to know about hospitalization versus being in the community, and when there may be times that our loved ones may need hospitalization?
Well, first of all, I think we need to give a lot of credit to the people who do make the transition from hospitalization back to mainstream society. It is a crawl.
Yeah.
Because when I was very, very sick, I couldn't hold a job, I couldn't function, I couldn't do the daily necessity things that I needed to do just to be a contributing member of society. So it was I was fortunate enough to have parents who could send me to facilities that helped me kind of go through levels. And once I reached one level, I would graduate to another level. And gradually, I was introduced back into like mainstream society, which was extremely helpful. But that kind of also goes to show things like case management and ongoing support when people do get back into mainstream society are crucial, I think, because
Mhm.
it helps people start to cope with reality a little bit, and then again, just make that transition from being a patient to being a person.
Right. And with making the transition and just going through that process, um, what do you recall as being your level of gratitude and your thoughts of maybe how life was prior to your symptoms, like before you turned 19, and whether you have achieved that life again, or if maybe it's even better now that you know how to manage and deal with your symptoms, as well as take advantage of the opportunities that are in the community, working again, socializing, and like you said, with your parents, being able to fully enjoy the love and affection of your family.
Absolutely. Well, when I was 19 and my parents first left me at a hospital, I begged them not to. I said, please don't do this. And I think my parents knew that at that moment, if they didn't, I probably wasn't going to live very long. And it was a tremendous effort on their part to, first of all, know how desperate I was, and to also not kind of take on my manipulation of, I'll be okay, I'll do better, because I couldn't do better. I was really struggling. The level of gratitude I have, actually, in full transparency, could be better. Because now that I am, I guess, quote unquote, normal, I feel like I'm trying to catch up for the 10 years that I lost. And professionally, you know, and personally, I don't have the same achievements as the peers that I had who I went to high school with 20 years ago. But my journey has been so different.
Right.
And so gratitude is something I'm really trying to learn to embrace in a different way. Also kind of embracing spirituality and saying that, you know, what I gained and other people may not have, because my experience was so different, was a level of enhancement in character and compassion. And so it's just, you know, apples to oranges, I guess. But on your note about gratitude, I could do better with that. I could be better. And that's part of my illness too.
Well, I think we all could do better with gratitude. You know, there are so many who encourage people to take time to be grateful, right? To have a gratitude journal or some kind of way to appreciate life as it is.
Yeah.
Many times we are focused on the past or focused on the future, and neither of those times are here right now. And to focus on the present is something that I believe all people should take an opportunity to do, to really understand where they are in life and appreciate that versus comparing to others. So I would attribute that to just being humans, that we kind of lack gratitude and take things for granted that we're able to do because sometimes we're just so focused on what we can't do. So I truly appreciate just having that moment to talk about gratitude, because I believe that that's just something we all need to work on. But having certain types of experiences in life can help us to have a broader perspective of things, especially when, as you said, you know, clawing your way back to what you want it to be in your life, and also just the struggle of living with symptoms that are not so easily managed on your own. So I commend you on what you have shared, and hope that you will know that you're appreciated, and maybe being grateful for that.
That's so nice.
Absolutely appreciate you being willing to share. So this is something that a lot of people, I think, struggle with, just going to the doctor, period, for physical exams. We just are too busy. We are helping our kids or other people get to their appointments, but not making them for ourselves. You talked earlier how mental health is connected to physical health. How do you manage your mental and physical health?
So, first, managing my mental, I have a psychiatrist I see every week. And we do therapy and medication together. So I'm lucky to have the same person who does both, because it really helps managing the symptoms when you can explain the story and then have them say, okay, well, maybe we should try this. But I have to be honest with you, Corey, it's the best hour of my week. Because I go in there like it's a class. I have notes. I take notes throughout the week with things I'm struggling with, epiphanies I have at night. Oh my God, this is why I do that. It is the best hour of my week, because I think we can all say, even if you don't think that you have mental health issues, everybody like needs somebody to vent to.
Right.
We all, and your family and friends don't always have the capacity to handle it. So it's really important to not strain those relationships, because in the past I have done that. And to have somebody who you really can offload and ask questions, and also go in with a mindset of, okay, I think I did this wrong. How can I do this better? Kind of having some humility, knowing my brain works differently and I function differently. and then being able to go and ask for advice and questions. It really helps me navigate the world.
Mm. So, what for those who are like struggling to find the advantage of taking part in mental health related um, management, just focusing on your mental health, prioritizing your mental health, what would you say to those individuals that, well, I don't want to go to counseling, or that, that's not for me, that's for other people, or I'm not sick.
Yeah.
Is counseling just if you're sick? No. So what would you say to those individuals?
Well, I do think there's a generational bias in some senses regarding therapy. I know, like the older generation, it's like we didn't talk about our
Mm.
problems. So we don't have any problems. We're not going to go sit in front of a therapist and have them ask us, so what happened when you were a child? And I first of all want to say that's not how therapy works.
Right.
Nobody's trying to like unravel like you. You go in there, I think, with a mindset of how can I be the best version of myself? And if you can kind of look at therapy not as something's wrong with me, but as how do I become better? How do I, maximize my relationships and my job and what I do in my free time so that I can live the happiest life?
Mm.
So it doesn't have to be that anything's wrong with you. I think it takes a mindset of just like wanting to be better.
Yeah. And in wanting to be better, for those who have a loved one living with severe mental illness, and the person living with SMI is not really aware of how they're living or how their symptoms may be manifesting and how their loved ones may be concerned for them, what would you say to help those family members that have a loved one who is in a crisis and not truly understanding their symptoms, or that they may need help? What do you feel they should know to not give up in trying to help their loved one?
First of all, I'm just going to acknowledge how exhausting it must be for people who are going through that. Because I know for my family, it was an extremely emotionally and physically exhausting experience. Knowing that you have someone who's struggling, and not only can you not see it to identify it because it's in their brain and you can't get in there. It's not something like a broken out, let's fix the bone, let's set the bone, let's fit. It's very hard to identify. And it's very exhausting. So first of all, I think I would give credit to any family that's going through that. The second thing I would say is obviously there is hope, and there are resources. And I think as time continues to go on and mental illness becomes more destigmatized, there will be more resources and people will be talking about it more openly, which is going to help. But I think ultimately, if you have a loved one who's going through something, just acknowledge, first of all, that you can't always fix everyone and you have to have healthy boundaries. I know something that was really key for my parents was when I was at the height of my illness, taking kind of almost like taking breaks from me to do things for themselves, because they could get enmeshed trying to solve my problems and kind of fix my woes. But it's really important to still have that self-identity and take care of yourself. That's huge.
Very, very huge. And I truly appreciate that. For a certain period of time now, it's been a couple of years, I've tried to understand what my advocacy is about, right? Because mental health is such a broad topic. It encompasses so much. And I wanted to be able to distinguish what I am talking about. And I'm talking about severe mental illness, but at the same time, there is a prioritization that's needed for the loved ones who are trying to help their family member who's living with severe mental illness. So the mental health is for both, not just for people who may have diagnoses, but also the people who are trying to help their loved one manage the symptoms related to their disability.
Absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways too, like, if one family member has it, it's very likely that it could be a genetic thing. So, maybe, if mom is already an anxious person or dad's already an anxious person, and now they have a child that's suffering and they're fearing phone calls of where the child is or what, I mean, that's just not good for anybody's mental health.
Right.
So, you need to kind of, I think it also takes a family effort. I
Mm-hmm.
think when there's one family member who has a problem, one thing that was really huge for me when I was going through things was like family therapy. The fact that my parents were willing to come and sit and listen and try to have a therapist explain to them what I was feeling and why I was acting the way I did. And it just allowed for so much compassion,
Mm-hmm.
understanding, and it kept our family like going stronger.
Yeah. That's really important because people give up on other people real quick sometimes. And as you mentioned, it can be a struggle to try to help a loved one who is trying to, or maybe not even trying to get help for their symptoms. And so in terms of the mental health and the family members, just being able to manage the stress that comes with trying to help a loved one who is dealing with symptoms that are unexplained. You can't wrap your hand around what you are witnessing, what you are seeing when you don't know that there is such a thing as severe mental illness. So it is important to acknowledge and understand that, family members may not just be on drugs or drunk or wanting attention, that this is really a medical situation,
Yes,
and that it's important for you to learn what you can about it and to tap into the resources in your community. I
absolutely.
truly appreciate your parents coming to the sessions with you. That I appreciate that. Um, how does that work? Did you invite them, or did the counselor suggest it?
My parents were they were invited, and of course, every family has the choice, and they could have said, we really don't want to be a part of that. That's hurt. But my parents really wanted a relationship with me. They wanted to understand me. Um, they loved me very much. They still do. And I'm very lucky. And so they were all in. Let's do whatever she needs. Let's do it.
Mhm.
So I was very fortunate. But I do think, I grew up with privilege. I grew up with a father who was financially successful. When the time came that I needed the help, my parents didn't have to worry about costs. They just did
Mhm.
whatever they could because the money was there. This is not the luxury that most people have.
Mhm.
And most people do end up taking care of a family member. And their capacity for handling that emotional strain, I mean, it's overwhelming. I think if my parents hadn't got me out of the house and into a facility or a hospital, it would have been detrimental to them and their health.
Right.
Because they
I
were,
appreciate you pointing that out because, that is a concern for a lot of families, being able to pay for things. And if they're not able to pay for it, knowing which organization, which social program is available to help,
yeah,
whether it's Medicaid or, a local housing organization that provides voucher opportunities for a person to continue to live in the community or to have a home once they return from hospitalization. So just knowing about those things can be difficult and complicated for individuals. Another reason that some people just throw their hands up because they don't know where to go for
yeah,
that kind of help.
yep.
But what I want to share with people tonight is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I encourage you to see if there is a chapter in your area, or find the closest chapter in your area, because it can be a foundational resource to show you other things that are available in your community that you may not be aware. And the programs with NAMI are free, and they're available to people virtually. With the pandemic, that's one thing I learned. There's a lot you can do virtually. And
Telemed.
so, yeah.
Everything telemed. You can go to your therapy appointments via your home,
Yes.
comfort of your home, on a computer. You don't have to go to an office if it freaks you out. I mean, there's so many more resources now.
Yes. What are some resources that you find helpful in communities?
So a couple actually. Definitely the fact that I can see my doctors via telemed because I do, work a full-time job, but I prioritize my physical and mental health as much as I can because they do kind of coexist, at the same time. And so having the telemed is really important. The other thing for me was when I got really sick, I had a hard time coping. I turned to food. Food became an addiction for me. I gained a lot of weight, still working on losing it, but that's a whole nother chapter. Um, and I was able to find support groups that I could do virtually to help with binge eating or body dysmorphia or, other mindsets. And so being able to even find virtual support groups was really helpful for me too.
Yeah. That's great. And so did you just like do a Google search or did someone tell you about it? Did your
I Google searched
Yeah.
and I found a great place called Meta, and they dealt with all kinds of eating disorders. And I joined a couple groups where it was basically all women, so very comfortable for me. And I just felt way less alone, knowing that like,
Mhm.
oh my God, like a lot of women struggle with this. So it made me feel really good to know that I wasn't alone.
So what's your go-to? Like if you feel that you might start to have some symptoms that you are not able to manage on your own or your traditional form of treatment is not working so well, what do you do in that situation?
It's a great question too, Corey. So I'll be totally transparent here and say I still have really, really hard days.
Mhm.
My, mental health and getting over mental illness, it's not a linear path. And it's hard because, the way my doctor describes it to me is like you were born without a certain emotional skin in your brain or
Mhm.
something. It's like you were born without a limb, but nobody can see it.
Right.
So you just respond differently to emotions, to emotional distress than the average person. So, knowing that about myself, I still have days where it's like I'm very depressed. I have a hard time getting out of bed. I find myself crying a lot more. One thing that has been crucial to me is finding a medical provider, which is the psychiatrist that I've been seeing for the past 10 years, who is so invested in me. And I can text him, I can call him, I could say I'm having a really hard time, my mind's racing, and we can kind of troubleshoot on the spot.
Mm.
And that is huge because in the past, the only answer was, oh my God, if you're having like a mental spiral, you just got to take yourself to the ER.
Mm.
And then, you're admitted, you're put on a psych hold, you're put on, and I just don't want to go back that way because
Mhm.
sometimes it's not, you don't need to totally go back just to kind of get a tune up almost. So it's nice to have somebody kind of on call that I can just say, I'm having a hard day. How do I do this?
That is very helpful. And if you're the family member that might be that one on call, um, just know I suggest like having your own little management plan
Yeah.
to be able to be ready when the time calls, or being connected to your loved one's treatment team to maybe make those calls when your loved one is not able to. Do you also include your family in your strategy of dealing with?
I do. I try, I think we all have this tendency to kind of regress to maybe more immature behaviors when we're around our parents. So I do try really hard not to offload onto my parents
Okay.
as much, because like, they don't need to hear it at, however old they are. So I'll let them know when things are hard for me, but they'll also, which is really important, remind me, Dina, you need to talk to your doctor.
Mm.
You don't know how to help you. So you really need to utilize your doctor right now. And hearing that puts me back in the driver's seat and it's like, okay, they're right. This is how I have to do this. I can't just run to my parents. But the
Mhm.
other thing I would also encourage too, when you mentioned a family member being the person on call for somebody, since that's a lot for somebody to be able to handle. If you have a family member who's got a serious mental illness, or you suspect, and they're not in treatment, but you're the person they go to, maybe you could form your own treatment team. Maybe you get a therapist, so that when you get that call, you have somebody to go to and say, my child is reaching out again. I don't know what to do. How do I do this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's really important that if your loved one isn't, actively in therapy or have a treatment team, that maybe you do.
Right. That's a very good suggestion, especially when it's like an informal situation, unless you've like been in the system, if you will, and have a treatment team through a local organization. Having a family plan could be very, very helpful in just the initial stages. But I do encourage people to tap into those resources that are available in the public, because as Dina is saying, it can be overwhelming, and you're not necessarily a mental health professional. So
Right.
it's important to have people who are mental health professionals who are trained to deal with and know how to, for example, de-escalate a situation, or just helping to manage your loved one's symptoms until they can get further help or assistance. So develop your own family plan, and ultimately get tapped into the formal resources that are available in the community.
Absolutely. And I think also, if you can tap into that, and you can kind of acknowledge the fact that, yes, you're not a mental health professional. And just to tell everybody, even when people reach out to me,
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who's been through a mental illness and has navigated the system successfully, somebody reaches out to me, I am not a mental health professional.
Right.
I can't diagnose. I can't tell you what to do.
Right.
I still have to create a boundary there as well. So it doesn't mean you're weak because you can't help somebody. It means you're not educated in that sense. And
Right.
that's okay.
And you can just share. We are experts in our lived experience. So our lived experience. And yes, it's important to understand that distinction, because there are people who have degrees, certifications, and are trained
Exactly.
to do that. And even NAMI, again, I can't talk about NAMI enough. I know it has helped me so much with knowing what to do, and how to respond, how to interact with my loved one. But the National Alliance on Mental Illness, part of their resources are the family to family support group and training, as well as peer to peer support groups. And again, they're virtual.
Yeah.
And there's just resources that are available 24/7. Mental Health America is another national resource. So I encourage you to look up their websites, find out what's available, just to give yourself some baseline knowledge about mental illness and what you can do to help your loved one, or if you are experiencing symptoms yourself. Don't try to do it alone. What do
No,
you say about that, Dina?
yeah, I completely agree, Corey. And I will add on to that and say, when I was at McLean Hospital, which is where I was put when I was 19, my parents would go to support groups at McLean Hospital.
Mm,
Other parents whose children were in that heightened state of mental illness. And it was so helpful for them.
hmm
Even they're not the ones who necessarily were in the illness, but they still needed the support.
Absolutely.
And so I
Absolutely.
encourage, find a support group, find other people who have children who are going through similar things. No human being is supposed to go through life isolated. It's the human connection that makes, going through the hard times easier. So find it.
Right. Absolutely. And so, with our society and just this struggle, kind of like a tug of war of what to do and what not to do as it relates to mental health treatment, hospitalization, um, it- how can we move forward? How can we make significant positive impact in terms of destigmatizing mental illness? And just talking about mental health, because it's not even, we don't even have to like get down to a diagnosis. It's just talking about mental health, period, because people don't want to be associated with the diagnosis, in my opinion. So, how can we help? I know we talked about stigma before, but just really getting into that, because like you said, the programs that are available at the hospital for parents, some parents would forego doing that because they don't want anybody to see them there, even though it's
Right.
for their child.
Right.
And their child may be there and they're not even wanting that to be the case. So how can we move forward, making significant strides in terms of destigmatizing mental health and mental illness?
Well, first, I think I would say that, I'm still kind of figuring out who I am separate from the mental illness that I had. Because the
Mhm.
first thoughts I remember having as a child were about abandonment and comparison and things that I didn't understand then, but that align very well with borderline personality disorder. And so growing up, I always thought that something was wrong with me,
Mhm.
and that somewhere I fell short, something I didn't learn, something I wasn't normal. I think, first of all, we have to say a mental illness does not define you. It does not determine what you can achieve. It's part of your story, but it's not your whole story.
Mm.
And I would encourage people to kind of try to look at it that way, because it's a disease, and you can control it if you get the necessary help. But I think we need to stop villainizing it and
Mhm.
villainizing it in ourselves, because I was told when I was very sick, my parents were told not to expect much from me professionally.
Mhm.
And I went after pretty much everything I wanted. Now, I'm not going to say I succeeded at it, but I did okay. And I'm still finding myself, and I have far surpassed what was expected of me.
Well, I like the phrase "I went after," because that is a major part for anyone to try to achieve any goal that they set for themselves, just to start, to take action. So we don't, maybe achieve all the goals we set for ourselves, but starting, trying, is a major, major part of it. And I commend you on that. And like you said, you finished, you went back to school, you didn't allow the gap in time to stop you from going and feeling any type of shame or criticism. I hope not from others, but that you went back regardless of the time and finished. So that is great. And we have to just understand that it's important that we even start, that we try, that we go after what we want to
And
do in our
Courtney,
lives.
the coolest thing about my college experience was I found my happy place.
Mm,
I found a college that embraced my story, and
mhm.
that was so proud of me, and I was able to excel. I was somebody who struggled in school growing up. I graduated at the top of my class from BC with like high honors,
Yes.
and I was able to find a confidence in myself again. And another thing, just to kind of motivate people, when I was in treatment and I was still in case management, I was living at a facility in New York. And as a kid, I had stars in my eyes. I always wanted to go into the entertainment industry. I wanted to be an actress or work in television or be a singer. And I still had that in me somewhere. I would commute from my case management program into the city to be an intern for Rachel Ray.
Wow.
That's where and I was in there with, I mean, I was much older than the other interns, but I was like, I don't care. This is what I want to do. I'm going to
Yes.
do it. And it eventually led to other internships, working in television. And it's like, I just said, I'm going to do it. I'm
That's
going to try. And if I fail, I fail. And I failed a lot. I failed a lot. I failed out of community college when I went back. I failed out of, a couple other colleges, but then I went back and graduated with high honors. So it's like, you can't give up.
Absolutely. That is a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, if anything, just know that anything is possible, right, Dina?
Yeah.
Like, you have to try, regardless if you achieve it or not, trying and doing all that you can, and even if you fail, I don't even use the word fail, because I think just even trying to do it is an achievement, but
It's
you
putting
just
yourself out
try again.
it's putting yourself out there. It's building character. This is
Yes.
one of the most important things you can build in this life. It's the only thing you take with you to the next life is the character, not the material things. So building it can come from failure,
Yes.
unfortunately. But
And you talked earlier about maybe growing in your spirituality. How does that tie into your mental health management and just staying on track with what you want to do with your life, and maybe even in destigmatizing the discussions, the thoughts of mental health?
So, another great question, Corey. I grew up as a Catholic, and I think I grew up not really understanding going to church, going to mass, not really understanding what I was hearing, but
Mm-hmm.
thinking, really believing in the whole good and evil thing. And you got to be good and go to church and everything. And then when I got sick, I thought, oh my God, I'm being punished.
Mm.
Something so evil to go through this kind of torture. So I stepped away from my spirituality. I stepped away from God. I stepped away from the church. I didn't really believe in that stuff anymore. And then my aunt, who is a Christian, took me to a service a couple years ago, and I just started to cry. And
Mm.
he was not only just reading the Bible, but he was explaining it.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, it was never a punishment. It was because he wants me to do something with it.
Mm.
And it has changed my perspective. I once heard the quote, God gives his toughest battles to his toughest soldiers. And I was like, wow, okay, thank you. I don't think I signed up for that, but thank you. So, but I do believe that it has a purpose. And in feeling that way, it makes the harder days so much better. It makes doing something like this give so much more meaning to my life. So I think spirituality and believing in something greater than yourself is so important, especially on the hard days. You're not
Yes.
alone. You're not alone. Every time, Corey, I tried to end my life many times.
Mm.
I was almost very successful.
Mm.
Every time, when I look back on it now, I think about the nurses who were there, the doctors who saved my life. God was right there.
Mm.
He's like, you're not doing this. You're not done yet. And if you look hard enough, you will find the presence in your everyday life.
Right.
It's a smile from a stranger. Even when I'm having super hard days, I might get a text from a friend randomly. Hey, just thinking about you. And I'm like, thank you. That's what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Heard me. You saw me, So spirituality is a big part of it now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Dina. I really appreciate that. And just tying this all together in terms of, knocking down these barriers that are caused by stigma
Yeah.
and just lack of knowledge and understanding. Advocacy is so important in helping to just overcome all of the potential barriers in destigmatizing mental health and increasing awareness. How do you use your story, your lived experience to advocate, and why do you feel that advocacy is important?
I think it's really important because, we go through things sometimes because our mission is to be able to go through it and then put a hand back and help somebody else through it. And I think it's really important to share stories as opposed to just being silent about them, because there is somebody going through it who can benefit from your story. If I at 19 had met me at 41 and had the ability to say to that 19-year-old, you're going to be okay. This is just a bump. You're going to get through it. You're going to be fine. It's going to stink for a while, but you're going to be okay. I wish somebody had been able to tell me that, because I lost hope a lot of times. So I think it's so important to tell your story, because you're giving somebody else hope.
Mm.
You're returning the favor. And what I hope to do with sort of my advocacy work, because it's still in its infancy for me, and that's why this opportunity is so appreciated. I'd love to be able to talk to corporations about incorporating
Mm.
mental health wellness into businesses to increase
Yes.
productivity, to increase just overall well-being. I'd also love to be able to just share and motivate people, because when I do that, I feel like I've earned my seat at the table.
Mm.
That's where my expertise lies. It doesn't lie in the professionalism that I could have, because I lost a lot of years and I'm not where I want to be professionally, but the experience that I had makes me an expert in this case. And I would love to be able to kind of utilize that and help other people.
Wow, that's powerful. And I have no doubt that you will succeed in that. There is a lot more going on in the corporate world in terms of trauma informed employment placement services or programs that are available, as well as opportunities to have speakers come in to talk about and prioritize mental health of their employees. So sharing your story is something I believe will be very, very beneficial for corporate America to listen to, and understanding and knowing that, their employees, there are a lot of people who, with the stigma and just fear of their jobs, be ashamed and not want to let anyone know about any struggles. But people are in the workplace who are struggling mentally, just like they're struggling physically with different disabilities and ailments, if you will. So it's important for corporate America, just businesses, employers, let's just say employers, to understand and know the services and the programs that they can make readily available for their employees, because overall, everyone wants to be productive. So, and
absolutely. And believe it or not,
important.
there's more people affected than you'd know. A lot of people are really good at putting up a mask. I was one of them for a very long time. So
absolutely.
Yes.
And so in the workplace, just, find out about FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and how your place of employment handles that, and whether it may apply to your situation if you may need to take time off of work for yourself or your loved one who has a disability. So, or a serious medical condition that, you need to help them go to their appointments, or you need to go to your own appointments. Don't be ashamed to ask about that. So, and it's supposed to be in confidence when you are dealing with your human resource office or whatever it's called in your place of employment. So that's another resource to look into, the Family Medical Leave Act, and how your employer handles that for employees who need to take time off of work. So, Dina, we talked about a lot tonight. I truly appreciate you sharing your story and being vulnerable and transparent. Please share any final remarks that you have.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for this opportunity. This has kind of been a soapbox for me, and I love that. I think, I can end with, I heard somebody on social media, because I do scroll a lot. I think we all do, probably more than it, whether it's TikTok or whatever. But and somebody said, God has such a purpose for your pain, but you have to let him have that purpose for it. He will never put you through pain without purpose. And it's us who make the pain unpurposeful when we continue to do certain things that maybe we shouldn't be doing. But you having me here and being able to speak about a story that brought so many years of such devastating pain to me, that's the purpose. That's where my pain has purpose. I can finally see that now, because for years I absolutely didn't. And I would love to be able to use that pain for something better.
Yes. And help people who may be in pain now, and loved ones who are seeing their family member in pain now, knowing that there is a possible and very real path forward. But you don't have to do it alone. And as Dina gave a quote related to religion or spirituality, I've heard a statement made, and many of you probably have too, that God will not give you more than you can bear. And I interpret that as saying you don't have to do things alone. That is the reason for having services, programs, doctors, medical professionals, mental health professionals in the community, because that is the support. You don't have to bear the burden alone. And some of us believe, and it doesn't make you less of a Christian or whatever your religious denomination is, or not, it doesn't make you less of that, less of a believer, or less faithful in your beliefs.
To reach
So,
out and get help.
reach
Yeah.
out to get help. Yes. So, with that, I thank you so much, Dina, for joining me today. And again, for being vulnerable and transparent. Your story is powerful, and you are using it for a very purposeful meaning and way to move forward and to help others to know that they can move forward too. So, thank you for being in purpose, on purpose, and being so powerful in what you are able to share and willing to share. So, thank you all for joining us tonight. And if you have any questions or would like to submit comments, please just put them in the comment in the chat. And we look forward to you joining us for the next Mental Wealth Wednesday, the last Wednesday of each month with Corey Empowers. Thank you so very much.